I sit here today to tell you of one of the saddest and cruelest stories in South Africa. The story of how the ANC was infiltrated by the Communist Party and then hijacked and uprooted from its creation roots. Think about this cruelty long and hard. The ANC, that was formed in a church by Christian ministers when it comes to power, reject Christianity and give South Africa a godless constitution. What happened? The plan to hijack and take over the ANC was hatched in Russia in the 1940s. It was called the Blueprint for South Africa. The ANC, with its mass-based roots, was to be infiltrated and taken over. That happened, we know. The ANC now is a godless communist monstrosity, the very opposite of the Christian ANC born in the church in Bloemfontein in 1912. The communist blueprint of the takeover of the ANC with the ultimate aim of taking over South Africa was called the 5-year plan. Here is the 5-year plan. I hand over Mike to explain the 5-year blueprint that saw the ANC infiltrated and taken over and made communists.
Let's expose the stealth capture of the ANC by the South African Communist Party, SACP, a calculated, multi-stage operation that changed the soul of the party forever. Here's the breakdown. This is a plan that was developed by white communists in Russia. It was called Blueprint for South Africa. How the SACP hijacked the ANC. The silent coup. People think the ANC just changed. No, it was hijacked, infiltrated, engineered from within. This visual shows you exactly how the South African Communist Party, SACP, took over what was once a Christian, moral movement of prayerful African patriots. Step 1. Join ANC and begin to influence policy. In the 1940s-1950s, white communists and Soviet-trained operatives quietly joined the ANC. They didn't come to follow. They came to reprogram. Names like Joe Slovo embedded themselves in the party and began whispering about class struggle, state power, and armed revolution. Step 2. Gain leadership position. Within organization, they were patient, strategic. They gained influence not by charisma, but by ideological loyalty and international backing from the USSR. By the early 1960s, the ANC was sharing leadership with the SACP, often secretly. Mandela himself became a full member of the SACP Central Committee, a fact confirmed only after his death. Step 3. Shift policy direction. Gradually, over time. Then came the ideological shift. The Freedom Charter, 1955, became the Trojan horse, a pretty sounding list of people's rights, filled with state seizure of land, banks, and mines. Marxism cloaked in the language of liberation. The old Christian leaders, Dube, Magatho, Rubusana, were silenced, forgotten, or co-opted. The ANC slowly became a vehicle for Soviet-style socialism, not African moral democracy. Step 4. Launch verbal attacks on establishment figures. Once the takeover was complete, the SACP-aligned ANC turned vicious. Missionaries were branded colonizers. Christians were sidelined. The family was mocked as bourgeois. Critics were labeled sellouts, counter-revolutionaries, or reactionaries. Anyone who questioned the ideological line was purged, ridiculed, or made irrelevant. Conclusion: what you thought was liberation was a leftist coup. This wasn't just politics. This was a hostile ideological occupation of the oldest liberation movement in Africa. The SACP didn't build the ANC. They stole it. And South Africa today is not suffering from mismanagement. It is suffering from the long-term consequences of that infiltration. A bloated state, a dependent population, corruption as governance, race-based law, and the total destruction of the moral and spiritual compass.
Communism has got nothing in common with African values of growth and patience. Communism seeks to destroy what is there. African values and traditions are predisposed in the natural order things that change by evolution. African values are steeped in spirituality. Everyone knows that communism is a godless monstrosity. African values respect and nurture the idea of a family. Communism sees the family as the enemy, for it seeks control of the people. To have a family and parents in control of their children is against the social engineering that lies at the root and heart of communism, where people, in particular the youth, must be controlled and shaped by communist ideology. African values appreciates the spirit of individual liberty, spirit of enterprise and individual creativity. Communism is about equality and collectivization. So Nelson Mandela abandoned African Christian values and got baptized into the religion of godless communism. That is what it is. He literally and openly denounced African Christian values, and according to his words, went on a path in the moral life. This is what he said himself. He divorced his wife Evelyn because she was a Christian. That is exactly what Mandela says in his Long Walk to Freedom book. The ANC was founded by men and women of Christian faith. There was no communism in the midst of the ANC. The ANC was founded in 1912 in Bloemfontein by Christians. The event opened up with prayer, not a Mandela. They were gospel songs in the midst of the speeches. The atmosphere was of calm, wisdom, and prayer, not fiery rhetoric. And that continued for 3 decades until that Nelson Mandela appeared and crushed the spirit. Drunk with a fiery communist spirit was destruction. Nelson Mandela set himself diametrically opposed to those who built the ANC, those who came ahead of him. He became a pupil and student of communists like Joe Slovo, and was like a puppet used by these communists to enter into the realm of Africans' worldview and tear down African values, and replace with communism. And that is where we are now. That is where South Africa is now, ruled and governed by communist ANC. Certainly, let me repeat, communism has absolutely nothing in common with the core of African values, where African tradition teaches growth, patience, respect for the spiritual order, and evolution through wisdom. Communism charges in like a wrecking ball. Its very essence is destruction. Communism does not build. It dismantles. It does not nurture. It seizes and controls. African values are rooted in spiritual consciousness. They honor family. They uphold the dignity of the household, the sacred role of parents, elders, and community. In contrast, communism views the family as an obstacle to the totalitarian grip it seeks. It aims to control the soul of the youth, reshape them through ideological manipulation, and erase the inherited wisdom of their traditions. African culture celebrates initiative, enterprise, and the sacred duty of personal responsibility. Communism suffocates all of this under the tyranny of equality through enforced collectivization. Let it be known, Nelson Mandela turned his back on African Christian values. He did not walk the path of our forefathers. He denounced the morality of his upbringing and publicly confessed to adopting what he called an immoral life. These are his own words in Long Walk to Freedom. He left his wife Evelyn because she was a devout Christian. That is a fact. That is truth. And that is the path he chose. The African National Congress was not born of Marxist fire. It was born of Christian faith and African dignity. Founded in 1912 in Bloemfontein, the ANC's birth was wrapped in gospel hymns, prayer, and wise deliberation, not in militant slogans or ideological warfare. For 3 decades, the ANC was a place of spiritual resolve, moral clarity, and unity in vision. Then came Mandela, and everything changed. Drunk on the doctrine of destruction, Mandela did not continue the legacy of the founders. He betrayed it. Under the influence of communists like Joe Slovo, he became a vessel, a carrier of foreign ideologies designed to tear down our African spiritual worldview. He was no longer walking in the steps of the founders. He was marching to the drumbeat of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin. And with him came the slow death of African values in South African governance. This is why today, South Africa is ruled by a godless, spiritually disconnected ANC. An ANC that pretends to speak for the people but has long abandoned the soul of its founders. This is not progress. This is not freedom. This is cultural suicide. It's time to say it plainly. Communism is not African. It is an imported monstrosity. It is anti-family, anti-spiritual, anti-freedom. And those who let us into its arms turn their backs on the soul of Africa.